Found deep within the forests of the Black Shroud lies the sylvan city-state of Gridania. Built on the northern shores of the Jadeite flood in the central Black Shroud, Gridania's strategic location makes it a major hub of commerce and trade. Named for the reflection of the canopy of the forest, the Jadeite flood provides not only protection, but powers nearly every aspect of Gridanian industry via the massive water wheels in its green waters. Constructed almost entirely from materials freely given by the elementals of the forest, Gridania is ever cognizant of the will of the elementals that reside in the Twelveswood. Gridanians attribute the power and protectiveness of the elementals to being part of their patron deity Nofika's essence, a belief unique to Gridanian culture. So central to Gridania's culture are the elementals that on the Gridanian standard, the white lily represents mankind's first congress with the elementals. Meanwhile, the gold field represents the land filled with the elementals' power. The twin serpents representing the unity of Hyur and Elizin originating from the city of Gelmorra. These entwined serpents are also known as a caduceus, which, while often seen in medicine, they actually have little to do with medicinal practice historically. Unlike the rod of Asclepius, which is only one serpent and no wings, and associated with healing and medicine. Additionally, the caduceus later came to be associated with the planet and element of Mercury, which can be seen in astrology, alchemy, and astronomy. The staff of Hermes is also emblematic of commerce and negotiation, which is extremely appropriate given Gridania's founding. In the year 660 of the 6th Astral Era, a second wave of Hyur migrated into Eorzea. 300 years prior, the first Huron migration forced Elizin from their ancestral homes in Aldenard and into Korthus. The current settlements being at or above the capacity to sustain their current populations and territories, the Huron migrants once again forced the Elizin into new parts of Eorzea. This time, however, they migrated into the Black Shroud. The elementals did not take kindly to these new intruders and immediately sought to purge them from the Twelveswood. Chaos gripped the Elizin settlements, as the Elizin were unaware of the existence of the elementals and could not even identify what was attacking them. Eventually, the Elizin realized what was happening and narrowly escaped being completely annihilated by fleeing to caverns deep beneath the forest. By 710 of the 6th Astral Era, the Huron population had swelled even more, forcing the Hyur to search for new lands to settle. The new Huron settlers set out and found themselves venturing into the Black Shroud. Initially meeting the same fate of the early Elizin colonizers, the Huron settlers quickly discovered what was happening and fled to the caves. However, these caves were already occupied by the Elizin who had settled half a century prior. With certain death behind them at the hands of the elementals, the Hyur pushed forward and found themselves clashing with the Elizin for the few habitable caves in the Shroud. For the next 30 years, the Hyur and Elizin would wage a brutal campaign for survival. By the year 740, both sides were exhausted from ceaseless conflict and resolved to put aside their differences as they realized that they had a common goal in avoiding the ire of the elementals. Both sides made a pact, and with the pact they founded a new nation, the subterranean city of Gelmorra. For the next 280 years, Hjur and Elizin would work together to expand their home and maintain the vast caverns. However, in 1020, something changed. The Ixali, which had lived in the Twelves Wood since the fall of Alag, drew the ire of the elementals. While it's uncertain what exactly precipitated this change, it is commonly accepted that the Ixali population had grown too large to sustain itself. Unable to support themselves with just their agreed-upon area of the forest, they began to expand their territory, clearing new land without the consent of the elementals. Their reward for violating their agreement was exile. Upon learning about the fate of the Ixal, the Gelmorrans quickly gathered those among them versed in magic and set about finding a way to communicate with the elementals. For 50 years, the mages of Gelmorra's every overture was met with silence. However, their perseverance bore fruit and eventually succeeded in conveying their wishes to the elementals. In the northern Shroud area of Peace Garden, the Gelmorrans and elementals reached an understanding where the Gelmorrans would defend the forest in exchange for being permitted to settle the surface. As proof of the pact, the leader of the mages who brokered the deal, Yoren Lightheart, was given a glowing light, and nearly overnight, 330 years after the subterranean nation of Gelmorra was founded, it ceased to exist. In the year 1077, the Gelmorrans built a home amid the Jadeite thick and named their new city Gridania. To honor their new pact with the elementals, a group of young spearmen assembled under Captain Jocelyn to defend the Twelves Wood, as per the agreement. As a symbol of dedication to protect the forest and its inhabitants, the Wood Dwellers donned masks. As the former citizens of Gelmorra grew more accustomed to life above ground, Yoren had a child. At birth, the child had a pair of bumps on their head, but was otherwise normal. As the years passed, however, the bumps grew into horns, and the child began to be able to prophesize natural events, such as rainstorms and plague. The Gridanians hailed Yoren's son as a child of the gods, and at 12 years old, he stopped aging. Initially thought to be a new kind of illness, Yoren's son explained that it was a gift from the elementals to be chosen as a mediator. Yoren's son had the ability to hear the elementals' thoughts. Over time, Gridanians realized that the child was a blessing that Yoren had been blessed with after sealing the pact with the elementals. The child eventually discarded his birth name, instead calling himself I-Ohokpota, which he described as being the sound made by the etheric waves when elementals spoke. Yoren and his family all quickly adopted the surname Pota after Iohok. Several years after, another child with horns was born to another Huron family. Iohok Pota took the child into his care, naming them Ukotenum. These children became known as the Padjali, and would only be born to Huron households on rare occasions. To this day, they serve as honored leaders of Gridania and raised in Stilglane fame. At the age of 42, Iohokpota officially assumed the role of Elder Seedseer, the first of the Seedseer Council. In the year 1322, Gridania faced its first true challenge. The Chigo, a natural denizen of the Black Shroud, carried a virulent plague that came to be known as the Creeping Death. The disease targeted the Hyur population and rapidly began to spread. Hyurs afflicted with the disease found their skin covered in a chain-like pattern before experiencing excruciating pain. Very few Hyurs survived the nearly always fatal disease. It wasn't until 5 years later, in 1327, that an alchemist from Ul'dah developed a cure for the disease derived from the Glimshroom. Though this halted the spread of the disease, the Hyur population was decimated, forever changing the racial makeup of the city. With the plague cured, the nation of Gridania grew and prospered. The exiled Ixali made their home in the northern mountains of Abalathia's Spine in a region known as Zelfatal, but this region grew far less trees with which to make their settlements. Worse, the young Exali born after leaving the Twelveswood lacked feathers and were unable to fly. The new generations were rendered unable to hunt as they had in ages prior. Facing increasing scarcity and ever-increasing suffering, the Exali sought to return to the Twelveswood to escape their fate. In 1360, the Exali tribes united and marched on the Black Shroud to harvest much-needed supplies for their homes. Having developed a method to enclose cerulean vapors in heavy pouches, they were able to transport heavy cargo into the Black Shroud to reclaim their lost territory. Hardly failing to notice the large force marching into their domain, the Gridanians upheld their part of the Pact and sent the Wood Whalers to intercept the Exali advance. A fierce battle ensued at the cost of many lives. The Wood Whalers were able to halt and repel the Exali host. The casualties suffered revealed the need for an elite force to watch for foreign incursions into the Twelveswood, and in 1363, the God's Quiver was founded. The God's Quiver consists of 12 units of 150 men each, and is based at Quiver's Hold on the eastern edge of the city, primarily employing elite archers from the Archers Guild. The God's Quiver serves as Gridania's eyes to watch and ward off incursions into the Twelveswood from watchtowers throughout the Black Shroud. Unlike the Wood Whalers, the God's Quiver do not remain stationed in a single garrison, instead rotating between posts to learn the terrain and be ready to challenge foes anywhere in the Twelveswood. The archers recruited by the God's Quiver come from the Archers Guild, an organization that originally began as part of the Trappers League. Hunters from the League split away to form their own organization, solely devoted to the bow, and became the Archers Guild. The bows used by the Archers Guild are unique in their construction and technique, owing entirely to their origin. The Elazin founders employed longbows and techniques befitting their weapons. These same Elazin soon found themselves coming into conflict with Makote hunters, who were poaching game within the forest and angering the elementals. These Makote wielded short bows, and after several bloody skirmishes, the two sides came to an accord, merging their weapons and techniques, creating the now standardized Gridanian-style bows. Peace reigned in the Shroud for another 108 years, until King Manfred of Alamigo laid claim to the East Shroud. His army crossed the Velodina River in the year 1468 of the 6th Astral Era, prompting Gridania to scramble the God's Quiver and Wood Whalers both to meet the Alamigan force in Tinochla, or what is now known as the East End in the Fringes. Gridania's forces were crushed in the first battle, ceding the easternmost part of the Twelveswood to the Alamigan host, and doing all they could to halt the Alamigan army's steady advance further into the forest. For the next year, Gridanian forces faced not only the threat of losing the Twelveswood to a hostile force, but also breaching the agreement with the elementals, threatening Gridania's very existence. Gridania begged for aid from the city-states of Ishgard, Ul'dah, and Limsa Lominsa. Having noticed the unconstrained expansion of Alamigo, the four city-states united to repel the Alamigan force to the east end, slaying Alamigan General Gilbard in the battle. This conflict became known as the Autumn War, and it demonstrated that Gridania was able to defend its borders not only from the beast tribes and hostile incursions, but from other nations and city-states. Perhaps most importantly, the Padjali received the approval of the elementals. They had answered the elementals' call to defend the forest.